The 1980s, a time of change. After the turbulent 70s, many people worldwide looked forward to the 80s with the hopes of peace and safety. Some found political freedom, while others found Reagan. So that went well. The 80s were a wild time of newfound music, clothing, and just general expression. A lot of the clothes of the 80s were very outgoing attire for both men and women, with additions of really bright colored clothes, along with full suits for both men and women as well. Music also found different ways that artists expressed themselves, with the likes of Michael Jackson, Madonna, Prince, Queen, and David Bowie, not to mention metal bands that also rose to popularity like Metallica, Guns N' Roses, and others in that genre. Not only that, but hip hop and rap had garnered a swift rise near the end of the decade. Not to mention the culture of graffiti had plagued New York with lots of tags appearing out of nowhere that had artists expressing what they felt around town. The general culture of the 80s was to be yourself and see what types of ways you can express yourself.
Construction of the Berlin Wall began August 13, 1961. It was a wall built between the east and west sides of Berlin, Germany. The western side of the wall was known as the fascist side, whereas the eastern side of the wall was known as the socialist side. The original and official reasoning for the wall was to keep the western fascists from getting into the eastern side and affecting the socialist state and spreading fascism to the people. But the real reason the wall stayed for as long as it did was to try and stop or slow down the number of people defecting from the eastern side to the western side. The wall was originally built as a makeshift barbed wire and concrete mesh. Over time, the wall was transformed into a 12-foot tall and 4-foot wide concrete mass. The top of each side of the wall had an enormous metal pipe with no grip, which made climbing the wall practically impossible. The Berlin Wall was surprisingly effective in stopping refugees and defectors. During the time that the wall was up, a total of 171 people were killed while trying to scale or sneak past it. However, 5,000 East Germans were able to break through or sneak past the wall and make it to the western side. On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall was officially taken down. Over 2 million people came to the Berlin Wall to pass through or to observe it that weekend, showing a true sign of progression for the decade.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The 1980 presidential election was a pivotal one in the eyes of Americans. Many were dissatisfied at the economic situation in America at the time. This gave Ronald Reagan the perfect platform to run on. Reagan won the 1980 presidential election and soon changed the political climate of America. He proposed huge tax cuts and lower regulations on business in order to enact trickle-down economics. During his first year in office, Reagan passed a 25% tax cut, focusing on the upper class. In addition to his tax cuts, Reagan wanted to increase military spending in order to stand strong against the Soviet Union. His increased spending matched that of any previous war and put the American government into a deficit. With lower tax income and more military spending, Reagan needed some way to curb the deficit he was creating. His solution was to cut government-funded programs, many of which supported people in poverty. The 80s made the rich richer and allowed some to prosper, but also tripled the government's debt and crippled the support for lower classes, making Reaganomics extremely unsustainable. Hopefully no one does that again.
The idea behind the artistic design for our mural was to tie in pop culture with important current events. For example, we painted the Berlin Wall with some iconic pop/historical figures displayed. Our color choice was based around the lively color surroundings the 80s. Bright, vibrant colors were big in the 80s, so on our mural, the graffiti on the walls and the posters on the floor are full of color and give a clear visual of the aesthetic of the time. We decided to incorporate a lot of important musicians and movies of the time to display on our mural, tie in pop culture and 80s classics. Up on the wall, we can see the Sugar Hill Gang, and above them, we have incorporated song lyrics into the clouds. On the Berlin Wall, we have famous icons painted onto the wall, sandwiched between graffiti. The floor below is decorated with the hit movies of the 80s. We wanted to make sure we incorporated as much pop culture into the mural as we could. On our mural, the Berlin Wall is being broken by an AE-86 drifting through the wall, which was tying an 80s style of car into the mural.